Our coverage of spring football for Saluki football continues as we welcome on a guy who was around last year, now the defensive coordinator. Coach Pron is the guy you call him. Lee Perchinsky takes time to join us. Coach, appreciate the time, brother. How's life as the DC now as you get spring ball racked up?
Thanks for having me on. It's been a fun off season. You know, you go into it, make the transition, get to step in, and then there's a million things put on your desk, and you got to get ready to go. And, you know, in today's world, you get in that in December, and you got to finish out the transfer portal. You got holiday break in there, so a lot of recruiting to hit the ground running, fill some needs in the off season. And then when you get back to it, it's finishing up high school recruiting and then hiring a D-line coach and getting right into install and getting ready for the guys. And at the same time, you got morning workouts, lifts, and getting all into it. And it's been a fun couple of months.
To come in as the DC, knowing you've been at least on staff, so you're familiar with, of course, Coach Hill and what his expectations are, but also a lot of the position coaches already defensively. How much does that give you? You've been a DC before, but how much more does that give you a leg up of just, you know, the personnel, you know the players, you know the school, versus if you went and got a DC job at another school in the offseason?
Yeah, so I think that's a big part of it. You know, I want to tip the hat to Coach Mack, Coach Terry. You know, part of those guys in this transition has made it so much smoother, like you touched on, having that relationship with Coach Hawthorne. You know, we're in the back end, corners, safeties, so we're working day-to-day basis last season. So our working relationship, our off-the-field relationship, it's awesome. So the ability to have that open line of communication, be able to get it from them. Same thing with our guys. You know, the corners, the linebackers were used to interacting with me last season for run fits, pass fits with the safeties. So I think all those transitions kind of help make that smoother because it's not like, oh, like you said, new voice talking to these guys. Bohannick, Shug, Bogle, Jay Black, Sebastian, those guys were used to having interactions with me on a day-to-day basis throughout practice, throughout scheme. And then obviously Coach Mack, you know, love Coach Mack, does a great job with his guys, and having him in there for another voice in the room to help ease that transition because we return the whole linebacker room. And that's going to be a really good room for us, and he does a great job with those guys.
You've had to cut your teeth in terms of coaching, Coach Pron. You've coached at multiple different levels. It's not just been the experience that you've had here in the Missouri Valley Conference, which, of course, being at North Dakota State prior to coming here. What about your journey, the path, the multiple different levels that you've had that's helped you grow as a coach, and that you're very thankful about the path you have decided to choose on? Because everybody's path different in this world. That's what makes this, what you guys do, so much fun, is every path is unique when it comes to being a coach.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like I wouldn't change it for anything. You know, the ability to start out, play Division II football, get my feet in the door, coaching D2, and be around really good coaches. Like at the end of the day, being around great men, great mentors, great leaders that can help shape you when you are a young coach and show you the way things are supposed to be done. And at the D2 world, you got to do everything. You're doing laundry, you're doing equipment, you're doing travel. There's no support staff that's helping you out. So you learn the full scope of everything to be able to operate and do everything you have to, and then have the opportunity from there to go up to North Dakota State and see how, you know, obviously probably one of the best in the business, do it across the board of all levels, all sports, and to get there and be around Coach Entz, Coach Braun, two of my biggest mentors I have in this profession, and I owe all my philosophy, coaching style to those guys because they're not only great coaches, but they're great men first. The way you see them operate with their families, their kids around the office, and get to watch them on a day-to-day basis really shows it. And then from there to get the opportunity to go back down to Division II and cut your teeth and be a defensive coordinator. And it's one of those moments when you coordinate. You know, I was at 25 when I took the DC job at Minot State, leaving North Dakota State, and it's one of those things where you never know if you can do it till you do it. And I was extremely fortunate with Coach Aldrich there at Minot State, defensive guy, be able to have my first opportunity to coordinate with the defensive guy when you have questions, need a little ideas to bounce off. But then it's also him looking at you and be like, no, that's good, Lee. Like, that's what we need to do. And so you get that reconfirmation and then spend another year D2 coordinator and then get the chance to come back up. It's kind of been the perfect process of being up, down, getting that experience, and then coming back to the Missouri Valley.
There are so many ways to get to a common goal. And if it was always just one way to do it, then everybody's defense would be exactly the same way through the country. But when we get to the fall, what do you hope are ways that guys like me are describing your defense in terms of how they play? What do you want, whether it's keywords, descriptions that you want this is how I want our defense to be described?
Yeah, it's actually funny you asked that. We had our first spring ball defensive unit yesterday, and we were talking about that with the guys. Like when teams call each other, coaches in the league know each other, everyone like, okay, tell me about Southern Illinois defense. If the first thing they have to say is like, hey, they're a 3-down defense, they're a 4-down defense, they're playing 1 high, they're playing 2 high, bringing 5-man pressure, whatever it is, we're probably not that good on defense. The first thing we want people to talk about is our style of play, how fast we're playing, violent at the point of attack, block destruction, finishing at the ball, and then playing together. We got to have a group out there. We talk about it's everything you do, it's for the other 10 guys on the field. When you go out there and execute your 111th play after play, that's when you're going to make the big play. But when you're out there trying to do a little extra to go make that opportunity, that's when we're going to find ourselves in some bad situations. So when people turn on the tape, when you're watching from the booth, mom and dad are watching at home, first thing we want to jump out is be like, those guys play really hard, they play fast, and they play together out there. Because I think when you do those 3 things at an extremely high level, the rest is going to take care of itself.
Look, and you have guys that play at an extremely high level and don't have to question their motor. Ben Bogle, of course, is at top of mind. Colin Bohannick, another, he just unfortunately got the injury bug last year. He couldn't play for you. How have those guys really set the standard throughout your defense? As you mentioned, that linebacker room is really loaded.
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest piece of it. We can sit in front of a classroom, we can sit in front of a meeting room, talk about what we want to be, but eventually it's got to hit the pavement. We got to be able to lead it, and it's got to be player-led. Coach T can't go out there and get off a block as a cover 2 corner. We got to have guys that are out there leading it by example, and I think that's the beautiful part about Bohannick, Bogle, and some of those guys. They don't do a lot of talking. They do a lot of showing. They go out there and lead with their physicality, and then when you see that across the board, it starts to show like, hey, this is the standard. We're going to be violent at the point of attack. We are going to communicate at an extremely high level, get us to checks, be on the same page across the board. And so that's the big thing we're talking about right now in that room is don't talk about it. We got to go out there and day after day be about it because this spring ball, it's going to go fast. We already got 1 in the book. When we wake up on Sunday, we got 3 already in and, 12 left to go. And so each opportunity we get to go out there, it's a chance for us to go out there and show it and continue to set that standard.
Late in the year, this was an individual that I think all of us were like, love what you're seeing. Can this be something that can build into something bigger? And Jeremiah McClendon, I think of the day he had at Missouri State, was so huge in so many ways, gave the defense, gave the team so many chances to get back into that game. Do you see him being a guy that can be a really big part of this defense this year?
Yeah, and that's the one cool thing about Jay Black. This offseason, you've seen him be more outspoken. You see him emptying the tank and in conditioning drills, station work in the morning, and being able to show like, hey, this is what the standard is. I'm going to live up to it. And we all know in this league and anywhere you go, like if you got some corners that can go out there and play, you got a good shot out there. And I think that's the beautiful thing about him is I think he's starting to realize how good he can be. Now, he's had a very unique journey. He's played a lot of ball at some different places. And so I think last year, like you talked about, started to turn it on at the end of the year. I think that's just going to continue to bleed into spring ball and into the summer. And he's got a ton of confidence to him. And that's our goal is to continue to build that confidence because when he's playing at a high level, this defense is going to continue to play at a high level.
You do have a good amount of guys who have had experience, especially up front on defensive line that are coming back and a chance to play. I know some younger guys on that back end with guys that we just talked about like Jeremiah McClendon. When you look at hiring that defensive line coach, how important that role was, where do you see Darius Davis really helping you guys in terms of who you're bringing in?
Yeah, I think like we talk about, especially in the Missouri Valley, it starts up front. You got to be able to control the line of scrimmage, win the line of scrimmage, get home with 4. Because there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in this league. There's awesome, phenomenal offensive coaches in this league. And they're going to find ways to manipulate you and in sets and whatnot and pass concepts. So we got to be able to create an identity up front. And I think that's what Coach Davis brings to the table. Like he's kind of, I look at him and he played Division II ball. He cut his teeth, went into Division II, coached at 2 different stops, then went up to Robert Morris. And he's shown he's got a proven track record everywhere he goes. He does a great job of building that up from the ground to the top, and the production starts to show. Does a great job. He's got guys in his office all the time coming back up and down, learning, watching tape one-on-one, and that's where I think he's going to be awesome. He's going to help create a culture up front that we need to be successful in this league.
Look, Ubaid Steed, of course, was such a huge piece of this team last year, not just in guys like Iverson that you worked with so closely, not just because of their skill level, it was because of their leadership level. I don't think there's any doubt that guys like Bogle and Bohanna and even Presto and so many others can slide into those roles. But how big are losses of that? And when you have those conversations with your position groups, that's clear. I mean, that's an obvious area that this group is going to have to grow in finding some of those guys.
Yeah, and I think that's any season when you get done. You're going to lose some senior leadership, some guys that do things the right way, play really hard. And two names you mentioned, Cap and Ivo, both the production matched the leadership. So when you have that opportunity, it shows. And the one thing we've kind of talked about in unit meetings and in the off-season workouts and stuff is there's different types of leaders. There's some guys that are going to be more vocal, be able to show it with their voice. And then there's guys that are just going to go out there and work really hard, outwork those around them, and set the example. Because not everyone's born to be a vocal leader, but the ability to go out there and show leadership with your work on a day-to-day basis is what we're going after. Because if we can have a group of 45 guys or whatever it ends up being when we get back in June when we have our full team, if we got guys that they know the standard, their leadership is the hard work they put, the vocal part's going to start to come. Because with the vocal, and like you talked about, those are some guys that played a lot of snaps, made a lot of plays on Saturdays. That's part of leadership too. You can't be up there and trying to rally the troops and you haven't made some plays out there yet. So I think that's going to continue to come some more of the vocal leadership. But right now, we're just working on our leading with our actions.
You talk about leading with your actions, but there's always a vernacular, the vocab in terms of how you guys want to describe things within. How much would you say that vocabulary, the terms you use, the terminology has stayed the same within you guys, but also areas where you maybe want to grow, switch things up? Where would you say you're at in that process, Coach Pron, with this group defensively?
Yeah, so everything's blank slate. We're starting kind of not from scratch, but, new terminology and what we're calling scheme, formations, all of that will be completely different. And then just what we talked about earlier about when people turn on the tape, what are they going to see out of Southern Illinois defense? And that's where it's going to come down to a day-to-day process from us where we got to live those standards. Whether it's we're in the classroom, we're in the weight room, we're in rehab, we're at the fueling station, on the field, all those actions got to match across the board. And so that's what we're living right now is everything we do is it a mental mastery. Are we out physically doing it? But it's all part of the process because when you do have something that you're starting from the beginning, there's going to be some ups, there's going to be some downs, but you can't get caught riding low waves or high waves. So we talk about right now, day one we have two coverages in. DJ, who I personally think going to be one of the best quarterbacks in FCS football, if not the best if he stays healthy. We all saw what he did through 3 weeks before he got hurt. He's going to find some holes in coverage. But we need that because when we get in Saturdays in the fall, we want DJ Williams making some big plays out there and going out there making plays. So we're talking about the process, about our day-to-day operation for us to continue to grow this thing and not getting caught up in results. Because the results, there's no result until we get to August 28th, 25th, 20, whatever day it is when we get out there. We're not even thinking about that right now. We got done with practice one, get off the field. We're going to watch the tape as a defensive staff after this, and then it's all about this meeting in the afternoon. Can we get in there? Can we learn from the tape? And then from the install, we go right back out tomorrow. So that process of getting better from day one to day two, 2 to 3, is the same thing in the season. People talk about the biggest growth being from week 1 to week 2. I don't believe in that. You got to be biggest growth from week 1 to week 2, but then you got to grow from 2 to 3, and then 3 to 4. Because we all know once you get into the valley, you got to be continuing to grow. And it's the best league in football across the board, in my opinion.
Well, if you're not going to keep growing, you're going to find out very quickly in the Missouri Valley Football Conference that you're going to need to as you go throughout the year and continue to build that depth. Coach Pron, it's been so great to get to know you over the last year. Excited to see you step into this role and look forward to many more conversations with you here throughout the spring.
No, I appreciate everything you do for Salukis.